What if I told you that the federal and provincial governments are now considering taking thousands of empty condos across Metro Vancouver and turning them into rent to own housing? Some people think it's a brilliant idea that could finally help first time buyers get into the market. Others say it's simply a taxpayer funded bailout for the developers. So, what's really going on here? And more importantly, what does this mean if you own a condo and are thinking about buying one or considering selling in Surrey, Cloverdale, Langley, South Surrey, or anywhere in the Fraser Valley? Let's break it all down. Hi everyone, Greg Holmes here from the Holmes Real Estate team. And over the past week, we've had several clients ask us about this announcement. And honestly, there seems to be a lot of confusion around what exactly has been proposed. So today, I want to explain what the government actually announced, why they're doing it, why some people support the idea, and why others oppose it. And finally, what we think this could mean for homeowners and buyers here in Surrey and the Fraser Valley. So let's just jump right in and talk about it. What exactly was announced? So recently, Prime Minister Mark Carney and Premier David Eby announced a new housing partnership between the federal and provincial governments. One component of that plan involves working through Build Canada Homes and BC Housing to help move thousands of completed but unsold condo units into the housing system. Now, initially, many people interpreted this as government simply purchasing unsold condos directly from developers. But since that original announcement, Prime Minister Carney has clarified that the plan is not necessarily about governments buying condos outright at full market value. Instead, governments are talking about using what they call innovative financing tools to help convert these vacant units into housing opportunities while also protecting taxpayers. Now, one of the biggest updates is that Premier Eby has said this program is expected to include a rent-to-own component. In other words, instead of creating more rental housing, some tenants may eventually have the opportunity to purchase the homes they're living in. And that's a significant change, because this isn't just about creating more affordable rental units. It's potentially about helping people who can afford monthly housing payments but who've struggled to save enough for a down payment. Now, there are still many details we don't know. We don't know who will qualify. We don't know how affordability will be defined. We don't know how much of a tenant's monthly payment would go towards ownership. And we don't know how purchase prices would ultimately be determined. So while we know the broad concept, many of the specifics still need to be worked out. And to understand this proposal, we first need to understand what's happening in today's condo market. Over the past couple of years, we've seen major slowdowns here in the new condo market across Metro Vancouver. Higher interest rates, rising construction costs, economic uncertainty, and reduced investor demand have all contributed to slower condo sales. And as a result, there are now thousands of completed condo units sitting unsold throughout Metro Vancouver. And that's a dramatic shift from just a few years ago when it felt like almost every new project was selling out immediately. So governments are looking at these completed but vacant homes and asking a simple question. Can we use some of this existing inventory to help address housing affordability faster than building entirely new affordable housing projects from scratch? Because building new affordable housing often takes years. And these homes, well, they're already built. So people could potentially move in much sooner. That's really the thinking behind this proposal. Supporters argue that this approach simply makes practical sense. The homes already exist, the infrastructure is already in place, and people could potentially be housed relatively quickly. Supporters also point to this rent-to-own aspect. For many people in Surrey and throughout the Fraser Valley, that's the biggest barrier to homeownership. It's not necessarily the monthly payment. It's coming up with this down payment. People are paying rent every month, but they can't seem to get ahead because housing costs are so high. Supporters argue that a rent-to-own model could help bridge that gap by giving people an opportunity to gradually work towards ownership. Another argument is that maintaining a healthy development industry is important. If developers stop building because projects become financially unworkable, that could reduce future housing supply and potentially worsen affordability over the long term. Supporters see this proposal as a way to help people today while also supporting future housing construction. Now, critics, they see this very differently. Many people's first reaction was that this looked like a taxpayer-funded bailout for developers. The argument goes something like this. If condo prices are currently too high for buyers, perhaps pricing should be simply adjusted lower until buyers are willing to buy them at a certain price. Critics worry that government intervention could prevent the market from correcting naturally. Part of the criticism also comes from the fact that many details still haven't been released. So people are asking, how much will taxpayers ultimately pay? How will these financing arrangements work? Who decides which projects qualify? Will these homes truly be affordable? And who is eligible to participate? Prime Minister Carney has responded to these concerns by saying the goal is not to simply write checks to developers, but instead to create arrangements that increase affordable housing while protecting taxpayers. Even with that clarification, many people remain skeptical and are waiting for more details before deciding whether they support this plan. So what does all of this mean if you live in Surrey? First, I don't think this announcement changes the market overnight. There are still far too many unanswered questions. However, I do think this announcement tells us something important. Government clearly recognizes that part of the new condo market is under pressure right now, and they're concerned enough about those challenges to intervene. For buyers, today's market still offers significantly more choice and negotiating power than we've seen in years. If a rent-to-own program eventually becomes available, it could potentially create another pathway into homeownership for some buyers. But whether it truly helps people will depend entirely on the details. Will the monthly payments actually be affordable? Will purchase prices be fixed? How long before tenants can buy? Will the people who need the program most actually qualify? Those are the questions we'll be watching closely. For sellers, particularly condo sellers, proper pricing remains absolutely critical because buyers still have options. At this point, I think it's still too early to know whether this policy will ultimately be viewed as success or not. There simply isn't enough detail yet. What we do know is this: governments recognize that housing affordability remains one of the biggest challenges facing Metro Vancouver. And we know that there are thousands of completed homes still sitting vacant. And we know that the government is actively looking at new ways to address both affordability and supply. The big question now is, can governments create a program that gets people housed faster, help first-time buyers, protects taxpayers, and avoids artificially supporting the market? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you support the idea? Should government simply let the market adjust on its own? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're thinking about buying or selling anywhere in Surrey or the Fraser Valley, we'd be happy to help. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.